Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on data fluency and the modern finance team. So my name is Eugénie. I'm head of finance for Kiko Milano. Kiko Milano is a retail cosmetics brand, like most of the ladies would know, but I find out that men don't know, so I'm just saying. My experience also includes various roles in finance for KPMG, MAF Carrefour, Algo Air Retail. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon to discuss this topic together with Katharina and John, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, Eugénie. So my name is Katharina Braj. I'm the head of corporate finance at CanView, focusing on global technology. I have experience across both developed and emerging markets, spanning from financial services to head of finance. For the last 3 years, I've been focusing a lot on finance transformation and obviously supporting the transition that J&J did with the IPO of what it's now CanView. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. I'm John Mahood, CFO at Laundry Heap. For those you might know Laundry Heap, we're essentially Deliveroo for laundry, so on demand. So if any of you have had any accidents and spilt your lunch or a coffee on your suits or anything and you need them dry clean, please download our app and have a look. I've been the finance leader for digital sort of scaling up businesses for the last 10 years across telco, tech, and now consumer services. And in these sorts of businesses, data becomes very important in terms of growing. I guess that's why I'm here today.
Thank you very much. So as an introduction to today's topic, I want to tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I was listening to the interview of a recruiter who was mentioning that salaries at the moment in UAE are largely remaining flat, with the exception of few in-demand jobs. When he was asked what are these in-demand jobs, his first example was commercially astute and forward-looking finance candidates. This is really not the answer I was expecting, so that's why it caught my attention, and it shows exactly why today's topic is so critical. As finance leaders, we have always been the custodians of numbers. However, today the game has changed. We are just no longer reporting the past. We are expected to predict the future, influence decision-making, and drive business performance in real time. And this is where data fluency comes in. Did you know that 70% of CFO say that actually data fluency is a top priority for their team? Yet, only a small portion of them think that their team are fully equipped. What is data fluency? Data fluency is not just using a few dashboards or hiring a few data scientists. It's about creating a culture where every member of the finance team, from analyst to the CFO, speak the language of data. Not only just reading it, interpreting it, but communicating it clearly, challenging it thoughtfully, and most importantly, using it to drive action. In a world where we have access to a growing number of data and we need to make decisions faster than ever, finance members need to move from being data consumers to data translators, which means we need to bridge the gap between raw information to strategic action. You're going to tell me, why is this so important now? And I will give you 3 reasons. 1, because the competitive edge lies not in having as much data as possible, but instead in knowing what to do with it. 2, because as I mentioned earlier, business partners are looking for more agile and more forward-looking insights. And finally, because hopefully automation has taken over a lot of transactional tasks and we have more time to focus on value-added activities. So this is all very nice on paper, but here is a challenge. Tools and technologies are evolving very fast, but the human capabilities that are using these tools and technologies need to move as fast. As I said earlier, we don't need to hire data scientists. We need to upskill and develop the existing finance teams and embed data into the DNA of how finance teams work. Tools and technologies we can buy. Dashboards we can purchase. But data fluency is a human capability, and this is where the real transformation begins. So today we are going to explore what is data fluency and why it matters, how we can build data fluent finance teams, and what are the challenges and the road ahead. So my first question to you guys, what is data fluency and why it matters in your current role, in your current organization, and for your teams?
There's a quote by Mark Twain that I usually use when I'm at the start of a finance transformation project. Data is like garbage. You better know what you're going to do with it before you catch it. And I think it goes back to what Eugenie was saying. There's this ask or continuous ask for more data, as if data would actually magically transform itself into insights, into a story, or even into connected dots across the business. For me and my teams, what I try to enforce, data fluency is about connecting all of those dots, understanding how those financial KPIs that we care so much about actually translate what's happening in the business, what's coming ahead, the trends that we're seeing in the market. So unless we're able to display that data and read the data and be able to craft a really powerful storytelling, the numbers actually don't mean a lot, especially when we're interacting with people outside of finance. So those are the type of capabilities, and that's what I see when it comes to data fluency. I don't know if you agree, John.
No, I agree. I also tend to use the DIKW framework, so data, information, knowledge, wisdom. Data leads to information, information leads to knowledge, knowledge leads to wisdom. And you then kind of get instinct and intuition. And the whole point about data fluency is that you can't just rely on data. You have instinct, you have intuition, and your decision making basically happens around those three things, but data is generally at the heart of it. So as an example, as a senior business leader or commercial leader, you will always have an instinct that there is something that isn't quite right. So what you do is you go and then look at the data. The data will then give you the what and the why. But then it comes down to, right, what do you do next? The so what. That's the commercial knowledge. That's the sort of the intuition. But again, before you make a decision, you're then going to go and look at the data and say, well, actually, if I go and change this, what does it mean to revenue, or what does it mean to orders, etc. And then when you get the answer back, you've then got the sort of the knowledge in order to make the decision. So basically, it just creates this cyclical nature of decision making across the business, but data is always at the heart of it.
So, how would you say that your role? How do you see the expectations of CFO changing in relation to data fluency compared to 5 years ago? Actually, you were saying earlier that your role would not have existed 5 years ago, which I...
In my organization, it certainly didn't exist. And I think it's a great testament as to where the finance department is going. We're moving a lot into self-serve, and we're looking for efficiencies all across the P&L, including our own finance department, right? We're being asked to be more lean, to be more efficient, and to craft better our resources and the talent that we have in our teams. So the shift has been pretty much to, instead of having people developing offline files like Excel or just consolidating data, it's about creating a visual representation that caters not just to us, finance leaders, but also the rest of the business. So in our company, we have developed full-fledged self-serve implemented across all the regions that actually our commercial organization also uses. What that means is that we no longer have finance people developing reports, and we don't have commercial leaders waiting for those reports to be ready, right? The data is available in one click in their laptops. But that does bring the question of how then does the CFO and the finance teams are still relevant if our leaders can access that information so easily. And I think it goes back to what you were saying about data fluency. We can produce the best dashboards with all the right finance KPIs in there. If we're not able to correlate that to what's happening in the market, to what's happening in other departments across the organization, then we're not going to drive adoptions, because our leaders are still going to go to the CFO or whomever is their finance business partner, and they're still going to ask them, I see the dashboard, but what does it tell me? What does it mean to me? Does it impact my targets? Is it good or is it bad? So I think the role of the CFOs is evolving more and more to being that co-pilot in the business, right? We've seen it here today with examples of a lot of you. It's not about gatekeeping the numbers anymore, and we need to let go of that power that we're kind of holding on to. And it's extremely difficult, especially when you look at people that have been in their finance careers for many, many years. They attach their identity to that power a lot, to being the guardian of the numbers, to being the person who actually gets to tell the leadership team how well did we do. So we need to shift our identity to someone who comes into the table and actually not just supports and tells the story of what the numbers are telling us, but we provide actionable insights as to where we are seeing trends, not year on year, because that's also one of the challenges that I see when I look at a lot of dashboards and a lot of people who come into data functions, not just year on year, how we identify trends, how we correlate that to what's happening, not just in our organization, but also in the rest of the market. And another thing that I think is becoming really fundamental is how do we start bringing also external data, not just our own internal finance numbers into those dashboards or those self-serve tools, but how does the CFO enforces or educates the organization as to what else do we need to bring into our dashboards and analysis to make sure that we are telling and looking at the story end to end.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think historically the CFO has been seen as transactional and operational, but I think nowadays actually the CFO's role is becoming more transformational and more strategic commercial in terms of driving the business forward and adding a lot more value. I remember maybe about 10 years ago working in FP&A, and I saw the CFO spend a whole day going through board slides, and I was like, well, that's just a really rubbish use of a day, because you're going to go and present it for about 20 minutes and get a load of questions, but actually you could have added so much value to the business if you'd use that day another way. So I think CFOs now are focusing on what next rather than what happened. And that means sort of, I guess, moving into more of a storytelling mode and, like you say, co-piloting with the CEO and saying, right, we need to make sure that the focus is across the business is on the right things. And that's probably easier for a business like mine, which is relatively small. I imagine that in larger businesses, it's a much harder task for the sort of CFO to take on that sort of role, because they have more stakeholders to manage, etc. But I think in terms of a startup or a scale-up, the CFO is definitely, like you say, the co-pilot to the CEO.
Thank you very much, very interesting. So actually we are mentioning about the finance teams who are kind of having issues letting go of their usual tasks. So how do you make sure that there is a change in the mindset and the upskilling of the finance team so that they can evolve together with this change of culture?
I think, and I'm going to caveat by saying that I am a strong advocate of change management frameworks. I think we disregard that a lot. And we need to be a little bit more focused on that. So when going through these processes, it's fundamental that we understand who are not just the stakeholders or who are going to be the end users of the tools that we are implementing, but also who's actually going to be impacted as well in their day-to-day, in their ways of working. And we sometimes overlook the impact it has on our finance team, especially the more junior members. It is very important, and I've done this in 3 of the 3 projects I've done in the last 3 years. I always start by understanding what's going to be the change impact in each of the areas, not only just outside of the finance department, but in the finance teams. What were the capabilities that these people were relying on that they no longer can rely? What are the type of things that we need to develop for them to be comfortable enough in taking the next step and becoming true strategic business partners? So one of the things that we promote and did already in the past is actually catering our junior finance team members with a series of courses on strategic finance business partnering. So what are some, because in a lot of organizations, they didn't have that role model to start with. So they don't even know what is it that they need to replicate. So it's important for them to see real action examples of organizations that transitioned to that model, how finance went from having a seat at a table to actually have a voice at the table. So those success stories are fundamental. Another thing I always like to do, and again, I have the privilege of working with different regions, so I always like to grab a case of success from a specific region, and then I showcase it to the other finance regional teams so they can see that there are success stories, there is value in this change. And obviously, I create a very strong change agent network. I think it's fundamental. I try to mingle a lot of junior people and more senior people. I think it's important for them to also be exposed to the opinions of those leaders that are more senior and have longer time in the organization. So I think the success and the secret is to put the people at the center of it, explaining to them and be transparent about the change that they're going to go through, and be objective as towards the skills that they need to develop, but also provide them the tools to be able to develop that. Another example that I always like to showcase is the fact that we usually pilot with a specific team. By doing that, and we do that typically with teams that we feel are a little bit more prepared, that have an advantage, that gives us powerful learnings as to what are some of the challenges, what are some of the questions that these more junior people are going to ask us, so we can be prepared to do the rollout in other regions and other teams.
Cool. I'm going to break my answer into maybe 2 different parts. So if I take the core finance team as it is at the moment, I think for me, go back to the framework about data and information, knowledge, etc. I'm trying to get my finance team to constantly ask why. Keep asking why, and many times as you have to, until you get an answer that you need. And the answer is going to come from the data. So therefore, that is sort of them sort of taking the accountability of saying, I need to know the answer. If you ask a question as like why churn has gone down, has increased by 3%, and they give you sort of a very basic answer of saying, oh, well, we lost X number of customers. I'm like, well, that's not the answer. It's like, why did we lose that many customers? The second part of my answer is, I've made a conscious effort to bring data or the head of BI into the finance team and as a direct report to me. I grew up, I sort of progressed in my career working as a commercial finance business partner, and you had HR business partners, but you never had a data business partner. And what I'm trying to sort of encourage now is that our head of BI goes and works with the relative vertical leads across our business and acts as a data business partner for them, working with them to give them what they need to be able to make the right decisions and drive the most value across the business. So the combination of having the data person reporting directly to me and sitting alongside the rest of the finance team allows us to sort of be, I guess, more inquisitive in terms of our understanding of what's going on and what does it mean. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm also finding it difficult sometimes to move the finance team from just looking at P&L, but understanding what's the business behind. So making sure that they get an understanding of operations as well. So what would you say are the most common barriers finance team face when trying to become more data fluent? And how can we try to overcome these barriers?
I think I mentioned, and John has mentioned a couple already, but I think losing the control is one, this perception that by not producing the Excel file, we're actually losing control, we're losing influence. It's actually freeing up time for us to become more strategic, to be able to look more into the future, to be more externally focused. So I think that's the shift in the mindset that we need to continue to reinforce, is that we're not taking you power, we're actually giving you more influence in the organization, because now you have this mandate of being much more strategic, much more forward-looking, and so your value is actually increased. So I think that's one of the misperceptions. I think another one goes back to the fact of what I just mentioned at the beginning. More data is always better. And that's not necessarily the case. You want to make sure that whatever data you're using or crafting in your dashboards is aligned to the KPIs to which the business is running towards, right? It doesn't make sense if, for example, if cash flow or if tax is not really a priority at the moment for the business, don't go and roll out a free cash flow dashboard. No one's going to care. You're not adding value to the business. So it's important to be laser focused in terms of the capabilities and dashboards that you're rolling out, because to a previous point I heard before, the resources are limited, right? So we need to make sure that whatever money we're investing in technology and investing behind the finance departments really has an impact in the business. And if we keep focusing on data that does not provide meaningful analysis or is not relevant to the main KPIs of the business, then chances are we got that funding once and we're not going to get it again. I think another misconception, and I'll give it over to John, I don't want to seem like I'm too negative, but it's the fact that we think, okay, we have the data, we're going to hire a couple of data scientists and we're going to create dashboards. In a lot of organizations, and I'm not just talking about small organizations, I've worked always in multinationals, and you'd be surprised about the amount of data we have that it's simply not harmonized. We cannot combine finance data with supply chain data sometimes. We cannot combine finance data with IQVIA or Nielsen data. So it's important to start with the fundamentals and understand where do we stand right now as an organization in terms of our databases? Is our data harmonized? Are our systems able to talk to each other? That will define the level of transformation or digital transformation that you're now ready to embark on. If you don't have those fundamentals, you can build the most beautiful dashboards. The data is not going to make sense at the end of the day. So I think that's sometimes overlooked, and it's very important in these processes because, again, you have this chance of proving to the organization that this is the right path, and if you fail or if you create something that at the end of the day is not serving anyone, then you have failed in your goals.
Yeah, 100%. Every finance leader should be striving for a single source of the truth, and I think for me, by having data or the BI team in my team, I'm then trying to sort of take that into sort of a data warehouse where we all know that there is, marketing will have different data, product will have different data, operations will have different data, and they'll all be coming from different sources. And I've had examples where we've been looking at our acquisition funnel, and there's obviously a period in the acquisition funnel where marketing hands over the product, like marketing's brought the customer in, and then the product's got to determine whether they actually convert or not. But when you ask the question to marketing and product, they're both looking at their data, but they're different data sources. So you're not going to get an answer there. So the data warehouse and the data team sort of building that and bringing it all together to create a single source of the truth is essential in terms of making the right decision based on the right data. But it also then allows you to introduce a self-serve nature across the business where you're not reliant on your BI team or your IT team constantly building dashboards and reports. The vertical leads and their team members should be able to go into the data warehouse extract the data in the format that they want it in order to be able to come to their own conclusions. And that goes back to the previous point about how do we make sure we introduce that sort of the data mindset, not just across finance, but across the whole business.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, in our organization, we have just implemented recently Power BI. And at the beginning, everybody started asking for a lot of data, and some of it is one-off. And actually, we started doing the analysis of how many people are accessing each dashboard every day. And with the exception of 2 or 3 that most of the people were using across finance, across commercial teams, most of them were just accessed once. And because they had one question, so they said, we need a dashboard for this. But then they don't realize how much effort it was to build this actual dashboard. So we need to be very careful when people are actually asking for data. Do they really need it? Why is the reason why they're asking for it? It's the main challenge for me. So if we can move to maybe questions.
We must have nailed it.
I guess it was very clear. Or not. Well, in that case, sorry. Thank you so much for your valuable insight. Thank you to all of you for attending this session. So if there is one thing you need to remember from this session, is that data fluency is not something which is nice to have. It's now a core capability for any modern finance team. It's about empowering people, not just upgrading a few systems. It's about asking better questions, not just building better dashboards. As finance leader, we have a unique opportunity and actually responsibility is to lead this transformation. So let's challenge ourselves, invest in our team, and turn data into a true strategic asset. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the conference.